The Model T Ford sputtered once, twice, then died with a wheeze that sounded almost apologetic. Clara Bennett sat in the driver's seat, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the endless stretch of Montana prairie before her. "No, no, no," she muttered, turning the key again. Nothing but a sad clicking sound answered her. She stepped out onto the dusty road, her sensible traveling boots kicking up small clouds of red dirt. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, and she shaded her eyes to scan the horizon. Not a building in sight, just rolling grassland, the occasional fence post, and a heat shimmer that made everything dance. Clara had been driving for hours, heading to Copper Springs where she'd accepted a teaching position at the one-room schoolhouse. Her entire life was packed in the trunk and back seat, books, clothes, her mother's china tea set wrapped carefully in newspaper. She lifted the hood, though she knew precious little about engines. Steam hissed out, and she jumped back. The radiator was bone dry. "Wonderful," she said to no one. The nearest town was at least 10 miles back, and Copper Springs was still 20 miles ahead. A sound made her turn. Hoofbeats. A rider was approaching from the direction she'd been heading, moving at an easy lope. As he drew closer, Clara straightened her dress and tried to look less like a damsel in distress, though that's precisely what she was. The man who reined in his bay horse was in his late 20s, wearing dusty work clothes, a battered Stetson, and a kerchief around his neck. His face was tanned and handsome in a rugged way, with laugh lines around his blue eyes and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "Trouble?" he asked, swinging down from the saddle with practiced ease. "The engine overheated, I think," Clara said, trying to sound competent. "I didn't realize I should have checked the water before I left." The man smiled, not unkindly. "First time driving through these parts? Is it that obvious? City car, city clothes, and you're about 15 miles from the nearest water source." He walked to her automobile and peered under the hood. "I'm Jake, by the way. Jake Thornton. Clara Bennett. I'm the new school teacher in Copper Springs." Jake looked up with interest. "That's so? Well, Miss Bennett, let's see about getting you there in one piece." Jake studied the engine with the kind of focused attention Clara usually reserved for her students' essays. He touched various parts, checked connections, and finally nodded to himself. "Radiator's cracked," he announced. "That's why it couldn't hold water. You hit a bad rut coming through?" Clara thought back. "There was a rough patch about 5 miles back. I felt a hard jolt." "That'll do it." Jake straightened and looked down the road. "I've got some water in my canteen, enough to get you a few miles, but that crack's going to keep leaking. You won't make it to Copper Springs." "What do you suggest?" "Thornton Ranch is about 3 miles that way," he pointed west. "We've got a workshop, tools, and I can patch that radiator so it'll hold until you can get a proper replacement in town." Clara hesitated. She'd been warned about accepting help from strange men on lonely roads, but what choice did she have? Besides, there was something honest in Jake's eyes, and he'd mentioned a ranch. That meant other people would be there. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Thornton." "Just Jake." He went to his horse and retrieved a canteen, then carefully poured water into the radiator. "This'll get us to the ranch, but you'll need to follow me and go slow, real slow. If she starts heating up again, we'll stop." He mounted his horse and gestured for her to start the engine. It turned over on the second try, coughing but running. The journey to the ranch took nearly an hour, with Jake keeping his horse at a walk beside her crawling automobile. He pointed out landmarks along the way, the old lightning-struck cottonwood, the creek bed that would flood come spring, the distant outline of the Bitterroot Mountains. "You know this land well," Clara observed during one of their stops. "Grew up here," Jake said simply. "Every rock and rabbit hole." "Do you work at Thornton Ranch?" Something flickered in his expression, amusement maybe. "Yeah, you could say that." Finally, they topped a rise, and Clara saw the ranch spread out below in a valley. Her breath caught. It was enormous, a sprawling main house with a wraparound porch, multiple barns, corrals filled with horses, and at least a dozen outbuildings. Cattle dotted the fields like moving spots. "Good heavens," she murmured. "I didn't realize. This is quite an operation." "One of the biggest in Montana," Jake said, and there was unmistakable pride in his voice. "Been in the family since the 1870s? As they approached the main compound, Clara noticed several cowboys working near the corrals. They looked up with interest at the unusual sight of an automobile being escorted by Jake. "Tommy," Jake called to a young man mending a fence, "get Sam from the workshop. Tell him I need the soldering iron heated." "Yes, sir," the cowboy responded immediately, dropping his tools and jogging off. Clara noticed the "sir," but thought perhaps it was just Western courtesy. Jake led her to a large barn that had been partially converted into a workshop. Tools hung on every wall, and in the center sat what appeared to be a tractor in various states of disassembly. An older man with white hair and oil-stained hands emerged from the back. "Jake, heard you were checking the north fence line. What have you brought us?" "City lady with a cracked radiator, Sam. Miss Bennett, this is Sam Kowalski, the best mechanic in 3 counties. Sam wiped his hands on a rag and tipped his hat to Clara. "Ma'am, let's see what we're dealing with." For the next hour, Clara watched as Jake and Sam worked on her automobile. She was struck by how knowledgeable Jake was. He wasn't just a ranch hand, but clearly understood mechanics. He explained what they were doing as they went, showing her where the crack was and how they'd seal it with solder. "It won't hold forever," Jake warned, his hands black with grease. "But it'll get you to Copper Springs and back a few times. Have Jim at the garage order you a new radiator from Butte." "I don't know how to thank you," Clara said. "What do I owe you for the repair?" Jake waved her off. "Consider it a welcome to Montana." "I couldn't possibly—" "Miss Bennett," Sam interrupted gently. "If Jake says it's taken care of, it's taken care of. Trust me on that." Before Clara could protest further, a woman's voice called from outside. "Jacob Thornton, you'd better not be planning to let that young lady drive on without offering her supper." A handsome woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway, wearing a practical dress and apron. She had kind eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Ma'am," Clara started, "I really shouldn't impose—" "Nonsense. I'm Elizabeth Thornton, Jake's mother. You've had a long day and it'll be dark soon. We have plenty of food in a guest room if you'd like to make a fresh start in the morning." Clara looked at Jake, who was unsuccessfully hiding a smile. "You didn't mention your mother." "You didn't ask," he said with a shrug. The Thornton home was even more impressive inside than out. The furniture was sturdy and well-made, clearly built to last generations. Family photographs lined the walls, and Clara noticed several that included a stern-looking older man who bore a strong resemblance to Jake. "That's my father," Jake said, noticing her gaze. "He passed 2 years ago." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. Elizabeth showed Clara to a washroom where she could clean up, then led her to a dining room with a table that could seat 20. Only 3 places were set. "It's just us tonight," Elizabeth explained. though the house used to be full when Jake's father was alive. We'd have visiting ranchers, business associates, politicians even. "Mother," Jake said with mild warning as he entered, now cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt. "Miss Bennett doesn't need the full family history." "I don't mind at all," Clara said. "I find it interesting." The meal was hearty: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from Elizabeth's garden. As they ate, Clara learned that the Thornton Ranch had been established by Jake's grandfather after the Civil War, built from nothing into one of the most successful cattle operations in the state. "Jake's been running things since his father died," Elizabeth said with obvious pride, "though he still insists on doing regular ranch work alongside the men." Clara nearly choked on her water. "Running things?" Jake looked uncomfortable. "Mother, you didn't tell her?" Elizabeth looked between them with dawning amusement. "Oh, Jacob." "It didn't come up," Jake said defensively. "She had a broken automobile. I fixed it. Simple as that." Clara set down her fork carefully. "You're not just a ranch hand. You own this place." "Technically, my mother and I own it together," Jake corrected. "But yes, I manage the operations." "Why didn't you say something?" Jake met her eyes steadily. "Would it have mattered to the radiator?" Despite herself, Clara laughed. "No, I suppose it wouldn't have." "Besides," Jake continued, "it was refreshing to have someone talk to me like I'm just another person. You have no idea how tiring it gets when people find out you own 40,000 acres. 40,000? Clara's voice squeaked slightly. Elizabeth patted her hand. "Don't let the land fool you, dear. It takes every acre to make this place work. And Jake works harder than anyone. Up before dawn, in the saddle most days, handling books and accounts at night." Clara slept better than she had in weeks. Lulled by the quiet of the countryside, so different from the city noise she'd grown up with. She woke to golden sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee wafting up from downstairs. When she came down to breakfast, she found Jake at the kitchen table with ledgers spread before him, a pair of wire-rimmed reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked different this morning, still wearing work clothes, but she could see now the authority in the way he held himself, the quick intelligence in his eyes as he made notations. "Morning," he said, looking up. "Coffee?" "Please." Clara accepted a cup from Elizabeth, who was moving between the stove and table with practiced efficiency. "I checked your automobile first thing," Jake said. "The solder held overnight. You should be able to make it to Copper Springs without trouble, but drive slow and stop if you see steam." "I will. Thank you again, Jake, for everything." "My pleasure." He closed the ledger. "I actually need to ride into Copper Springs next week for a meeting with the bank. I can stop by and make sure you got there all right." "That's not necessary." "Probably not," he agreed. "But I'd like to anyway, if that's all right with you." Something in his tone made Clara's heart skip. She nodded. "I'd like that too." After breakfast, Jake walked her out to where her automobile waited. Someone had washed it. The dust of yesterday was gone, and it gleamed in the morning sun. "Sam couldn't help himself," Jake explained. "He loves any machine with an engine." As Clara climbed into the driver's seat, Jake leaned against the door. "Fair warning about Copper Springs. It's a small town. By noon today, everyone will know you spent the night at the ranch. Should I be worried?" "Nah, but you might get some questions," he grinned. "And possibly some visitors. The ladies' auxiliary has been dying to meet the new teacher." "Wonderful," Clara said dryly. "I was hoping to have at least a day to settle in." "Welcome to small-town Montana, Miss Bennett." "Clara," she corrected. "I think after you've saved my automobile and fed me supper, you can call me Clara." "Clara," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "Safe travels. I'll see you next week." She started the engine. It turned over smoothly and gave him a small wave before heading down the long drive. In her mirror, she saw him standing there watching her go, and she couldn't help but smile. Copper Springs was everything Clara expected from a Montana frontier town. One main street, a handful of stores, a church, a saloon, and wooden boardwalks connecting the buildings. The schoolhouse sat on the edge of town, a white clapboard building with a bell tower. True to Jake's prediction, by evening Clara had received visits from half the town's women. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, brought a casserole. Mrs. Chen from the general store brought fresh linens. Miss Abigail Wright, who ran the boarding house where Clara would be staying, brought curiosity. "So," Miss Abigail said, settling into Clara's small sitting room with tea, "you met the Thornton boy." "I had some trouble with my automobile. He was kind enough to help." "And invited you to dinner at the ranch, I heard." Word traveled faster than Clara imagined possible. "His mother invited me. It was getting late." "Oh, I'm not criticizing, dear," Miss Abigail smiled. "Jake Thornton is a good man. Lost his father young, had to take over the whole operation and never let it make him hard. Still treats everyone with respect, from the newest ranch hand to the governor himself. He seems very capable. That's a polite word for it." Miss Abigail leaned in conspiratorially. "Half the eligible women in 3 counties have set their caps at him, but Jake's not interested in social climbers or anyone who sees him as just a rich rancher. His mother says he wants someone who sees him, not the ranch." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure I don't know why you're telling me this." "Don't you?" Miss Abigail's eyes twinkled. "I heard he's planning to visit next week. Jake Thornton hasn't paid a social call to anyone in 2 years, dear. Trust me, this is news." The week passed quickly. Clara met her students, 15 children ranging from 6 to 14, from ranch families and townfolk alike. She organized her classroom, planned lessons, and tried not to think too much about a certain rancher with blue eyes and gentle hands. When Jake arrived the following Thursday, riding into town on his bay horse, Clara was outside the schoolhouse supervising afternoon recess. The children noticed him first. "Mr. Thornton," called Billy Henderson, the banker's son. "Did you bring any horses?" Jake dismounted with an easy smile. "Not today, Billy. How's your arithmetic coming?" "Better, sir. Miss Bennett makes it interesting." Jake's eyes found Clara's, and he tipped his hat. "Does she now? That's good to hear." After the children went back to their games, Jake approached. "Thought I'd check on that automobile. Did you see Jim about the radiator?" "I did. He's ordered one, but it won't arrive for 2 weeks. The solder holding?" "Perfectly. You and Sam do good work." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the children play. "I was wondering," Jake said finally, "if you might join me for dinner on Saturday. There's a decent restaurant in town, or if you prefer, my mother would love to have you at the ranch again." "The restaurant sounds lovely," Clara said, her heart racing. "But won't that cause talk?" "Probably." Jake grinned. "Is that a problem?" "Not for me, if it's not for you." "Then it's settled. I'll pick you up at 6. Saturday's dinner was the first of many. Over the following months, as summer faded to autumn, Jake became a regular fixture in Copper Springs. He'd ride in after finishing work, always dusty and tired, but his face would light up when he saw Clara. They'd walk together through the town, talking about everything. Her students, his cattle, books they'd read, dreams they'd had as children. Clara learned that Jake had attended college in the East but came back because the ranch was in his blood. He'd turned down a prestigious banking position to come home and work alongside his father. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Never," Jake said without hesitation. "The ranch isn't just land and cattle. It's the people who work there, families who've been with us for generations. It's knowing every fence line, every watering hole. It's home. You talk about it like it's alive." "Maybe it is in a way." He looked at her seriously. "Could you ever see yourself here, Clara? Really here? Not just teaching for a year or two before going back east?" She'd been expecting this question, had asked it of herself many times. "I think I'm starting to," she said softly. "Montana has a way of getting into your bones." "Or maybe it's not just Montana," Jake said, taking her hand. Their courtship became the talk of the county, though most folks approved. Elizabeth Thornton visited Clara regularly, and Clara could see where Jake got his kindness and sharp intelligence. The ranch hands treated her with affectionate respect, and Sam always insisted on checking her automobile whenever she visited the ranch. But not everyone was pleased. One November afternoon, Clara received a visit from Victoria Ashford, a beautiful young woman whose father owned the neighboring ranch. Victoria swept into the schoolhouse after classes ended, dressed in expensive riding clothes. "Miss Bennett," she said coolly, "I thought it was time we met. Miss Ashford, I've heard about your family, and I've heard plenty about you." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The little school teacher who caught Jake Thornton's attention with a convenient breakdown." Clara kept her voice steady. "My automobile breakdown was hardly convenient, I assure you." "Of course not." Victoria examined her gloves. "You should know that Jake and I have an understanding. Our families have been neighbors for decades. It's expected that we'll marry and combine the ranches." "Has Jake agreed to this understanding?" "Jake is practical. He knows a rancher needs a wife who understands this life, not some city girl playing at country living." After Victoria left, Clara sat at her desk feeling shaken. Was there truth to what Victoria said? Jake had never mentioned her, but that didn't mean there wasn't history there. That weekend, when Jake came to take Clara for their usual Saturday evening, she was quieter than normal. They were sitting in the boarding house parlor. It was too cold now for their walks, when Jake finally asked what was wrong. "Victoria Ashford came to see me," Clara said. Jake's expression darkened. "What did she say?" "That you two have an understanding. That everyone expects you to marry her." "Clara, is it true? Not the understanding part, I know you'd have told me. But the expectations?" Jake stood and paced to the window. "Our fathers talked about it years ago, yes, before I went to college. But I never agreed to anything, and after my father died, Victoria's father stopped mentioning it." He turned to face her. "Victoria has made her interest clear over the years, but I've never encouraged it. I don't love her. I don't even particularly like her. She said I was playing at country living, that I don't belong here." "And what do you think?" Clara took a deep breath. "I think I've never felt more at home anywhere. I love my students, I love this town, and She hesitated. Jake crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "You what?" "I love you," Clara said, the words coming easier than she expected. "I think I started falling for you the moment you looked at my radiator with such serious concentration." Jake laughed, relief and joy flooding his face. "I love you too. I wanted to tell you weeks ago, but I was afraid of rushing you." He took her hands. "Clara Bennett, I don't care what Victoria Ashford or anyone else thinks. You're not playing at country living, you're living it, authentically and beautifully. You've made this place better just by being in it." "Even though I still don't know much about radiators?" "Especially because of that. Keeps me useful." He grew serious. "I want to marry you, Clara. I want you at the ranch, teaching our children alongside the ones at school, making that big house a home again. But I need you to be sure. Once you marry me, you marry the ranch too. Everything that comes with it." Clara thought about the past months, the land she'd grown to love, the community she'd become part of, the students who called her name eagerly each morning, and Jake, who'd seen her not as a city girl or a conquest, but simply as Clara. "I'm sure," she said, "though I have one condition." "Name it." "You have to teach me properly about engines. I refuse to be helpless with my own automobile." Jake pulled her up and into his arms. "Deal. I'll even throw in lessons on horseback riding and cattle roping." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Clara laughed. They married that spring, in the little church in Copper Springs. The whole county turned out for the wedding, even Victoria Ashford, who had the grace to offer stiff congratulations. Elizabeth Thornton cried happy tears, and Sam Kowalski gave Clara a complete set of mechanics tools as a wedding present. As Jake drove them back to the ranch, in Clara's now perfectly running automobile, Clara looked at the land stretching out before them, golden with spring grass. The same land where she'd broken down all those months ago, lost and uncertain. "Having second thoughts?" Jake asked, noticing her expression. "Not even close," Clara said, taking his hand. "I was just thinking that sometimes the best things happen when everything breaks down." "Like radiators?" "Like radiators," she agreed, laughing. And as they turned down the long drive toward home, toward their life together, Clara knew she'd found something more valuable than she'd ever imagined when she set out for Montana. Not just love, but belonging, purpose, and a man who'd fixed more than just her car on that dusty road. He'd helped her find herself.